Here we go. Okay, so we are live. Welcome, Nina Angelo, over there in New South Wales, from here in
McMaster's Beach.
McMaster Beach. I'm having a whiskey here because it's middle of the week, Wednesday. What are you having over there at McMaster's
I'm
Beach?
having water.
Oh dear, they're very tame over there,
No,
McMaster's Beach.
no, well, I'm addicted to water and watermelon. That's my two
Oh,
addictions.
now, it's been what? How many months now? 5 months ago when we met at Melbourne at that
Yes,
writers' conference. Now, since then, you fell down some stairs, and I believe you told me briefly, didn't get a chance to discuss it. You believe that you were pushed down by a ghost,
I do by entities,
or let's call
ghost,
it an entity better. I like
ghost
ghosts.
entities. I believe that. I really do.
So
Because I
tell me,
really, yeah,
so tell
because
me,
I,
what happened?
what happened? So we did the 2 days of the Able Expo, the Author and Book Launch Expo, which
Yeah,
was a big one for me. It was in early October,
that's right.
and it was exactly 3 years that I first launched my book in the Jewish Museum and up here where I live. And I came down with a stage 4 lymphoma. So I couldn't get my book out there. I had to heal and I had no choice. I lost all my hair, I lost weight. So I got myself together because I've got a very strong spirit. And with the help of plant medicine as well as some chemo, I managed to beat it. So
Great.
I started getting it together again. I had heard about the expo, the book author and book launch expo. I had booked in 2020 to do it at the end of 2020. And anyway, I couldn't do it. And of course, COVID came in, it was put off, and it was put off to 2021. So gave me 3 years to get it together. And in the meantime, had an audio book done, a really good audio book with 3 actors taking the 3 parts of my mum, my dad, and me. And there I was on the big stage, did my presentation where I met you, Mike.
Yep, we met
And the
there.
day after the big gala, we were invited to go to one of the authors' places on Phillip Island for an overnight stay before we drove back to New South Wales. And that night at about 1:30 in the morning, I was going to the loo and I found myself at the bottom of the stairs. My indent of my body was in the landing wall. I don't know. I've had a lot of thought about this because I did not trip and I did not stumble. I'm a very sensitive person. I'm very empathetic. I have a lot of empathy and a lot of trust and very patient. And I'm also very mindful about every step I take because I did not want to go down again
But
as
did
I
you
did.
feel something push you?
I didn't feel the push. I just found myself at the bottom of the
Ah,
stairs.
yeah.
I didn't feel it. I've been thinking about it. And I did not walk close to the stairs because I have stairs at my place and I never walk close to the stairs. And I was perfectly in my right mind and everything. So it was only later that I thought about how this could have happened. And I
Okay.
believe because this conference was above the casino in Melbourne, and these are very dark places to me. They're very dark places. They're almost underground, lots of machines and lights flashing, and you name it.
Yeah, I agree. I walked through that casino. I walked all the way to the back and then all the way front. It's had some serious negative energy in it. There's a dreadful
Very
place.
much. And I
Very
only came to that conclusion a few days ago where I've
oh,
been thinking about it and thinking about it. And then I realized I really think some entity, dark entity, had attached itself to me. And because I carry a lot of light, I'm always positive and I'm always happy. And I really believe that's what it was.
okay. So when we met there, right? I remember. I think when did you speak? You spoke about mid morning or about 11ish or something, didn't you?
Yeah, the
Some
first day.
Yeah, on the first day. So you were like about 11 o'clock, and there'd been a number of people beforehand, so everybody was getting a bit tired, watching all of these speakers, and then I was sitting with a bunch of people, and one of them was my own publisher, Karen McDermott, and I was sitting next to her, and you came on with your opening lines, and you said, "Both of my parents are survivors of Auschwitz." And I looked at Karen, I said, "What?" I said, "Who's this?" So I had to look at the thing. Nina Angelo. I said, "Do you know her?" I said, "No, she doesn't." I said, "Okay, so you had the audience." So tell us about that. That was your opening line, but you're Greek, so join some dots for us here.
Okay, yes, I was born in Athens in Greece in 1947, early 47. There was a civil war on in Greece at that time. My father was a Greek Jewish man, a Sephardic Jew from Thessaloniki in northern Greece, and my mother was a young Polish girl, 16, 17 years younger than my father, when they met in Auschwitz. They met in Auschwitz the first time, and he made a pass at her because my father was an elite prisoner. Because he was a political prisoner originally and then handed himself over as Jewish. That's how he ended up there. And that was sort of a story in the book, another one. Because he was in a commando called the Canada Commando, because they saw Canada as being the land of milk and honey. And their role, they were the only prisoners in Auschwitz. There were about 70 of them who were on the platforms when the transports came in.
Oh, yeah.
And when all the people came out of that, and their job was to get everything that they brought with them because they believed that they were going to be starting a new life. So they came with everything: food, suitcases, things that they needed, their gold, their diamond, money, you name it. They came with all of that. And so that was the role of the Canada Commando, to get all the stuff. So they also secreted stuff into some of the suitcases, and they could bribe the guards. And by bribing all the guards, they had a much easier life. They also had their own barracks.
Wow.
And so they were like electricians. They could go into the women's camp as electricians. I mean, they were also shrewd. They were socialists. The whole lot of the Canada Commando were socialists. And my father joined the Socialist Party when he was 11 in Greece. So that's how he got in, because he had to pass a little test before.
So what happened after Auschwitz was liberated? He went back with your mother to Greece.
Yeah, no, because they both went in separate ways. He went on to other camps. She knocked him back, and they went on the death marches, but separately. And they had asked to go when the war ended, to go to Paris. There were many Red Cross centers set up around Europe for the refugees. And because my mum and dad both spoke French, and my mother's father went to fight, he was a doctor for the Polish English army, she thought maybe if she could get close, he may have survived, because she lost everybody else. And so that's how she ended up in Paris, and my father ended up in Paris. And they met in the Red Cross canteen as refugees.
Walk in, and they realized that they were.
Well, it was a beautiful love story, because my mum went to the Allied headquarters in Paris to find out about her father, and the man she saw knew her father and knew that he had survived. And he gave her some money, £10, and told her, she was with a friend from the camp, told her to get herself some clothing, some outfits, anything, because they were just in their rags. Yeah. And that was a lot of money. And so she went down one of the little Paris lanes with her friends, and she saw a mannequin in a shop window with this beautiful teal blue dress. And she stopped dead, because this was the absolute antithesis of everything that she'd just gone through. She was only 16 when the war started. Here she was, like a young woman in her prime.
How old was she then when it finished?
She would have been, so she was born in 1924, 34. It finished in, so she would have been 20
Okay. Right.
2021.
So
And
this
so
dress doesn't sound very practical. I can understand her wanting it, but
look, she went, her friend said to her, "This is not right, Yanka. We haven't even got underwear, underclothing. You know, we can get so much with this." And my mum said, "You're right, you're right." And they started walking down the street. And then all of a sudden she stopped and she said, "Listen, we didn't have anything before. We don't know what's going to happen after, but I want that dress." And she went back and she put the dress on, this teal blue dress, and it fitted her perfectly. I mean, you can imagine how she felt after what she'd gone through.
it
And
must
she
have been,
walked out.
must have been
Yeah.
ecstatic.
So she walked out wearing this dress. It cost the full £10, Mike. And that evening
A
she
lot of
walked
money
into
back
the
then.
yeah, well, she walked into the Red Cross canteen in this beautiful dress, and my father was there, and he saw her,
Oh,
and
that's
he said, "Haven't I seen you before?" And she said, "No, I know you men. You say that to all the girls." And she went to walk off, and he called her by her name. He said, Isn't your name Janine?" And she stopped at that. And
right.
that's how their romance started. They were engaged on Bastille Day, and
Wow. Okay, yeah.
yeah, first refugees to be married in London because she found her father in the
So, so,
registry office.
so they went from Paris back to London
So
together.
because she found her father, so they were there. Then she went there, and then my dad went there, and then he went to Greece because he had a business in Greece. He was a
Ah,
businessman, an importer, and his partner was still there, and he had an apartment and everything in Athens. And so he went there, and then it was the big challenge how she was going. They were married, but she could not get there because everything was closed in Europe after the war, straight after. It was
yeah,
very
yeah.
difficult. But because my father was a very canny man, he got on a Navy ship. They took her to Greece, to Athens, and she
Wow.
was pregnant with me, and then I was born. There you go.
So you were created in London, born in Athens.
I was. I
Yeah,
was.
I should have called you London.
Yeah. And then traveled to Australia.
Could have
And
been worse. You could have been called Paddington.
well, I don't. Do you think so? Do you think so? I was called many names, but I must say, I came out with curly hair. The whole world was ahead of me. I was their first new life after they'd lost everybody, after this what they had experienced. And I came into the world, and I
Mm.
believe I came from the stars. I always believed that since I was very young. I used to wave to my stars. I knew exactly where they were, and I still believe it to this day, and I'm 76 now. So there you
So
go.
what happened to the blue teal dress?
I never saw the blue teal dress, but I guess my mum had it for a while. I was born, I don't know, I mean, I came in this human body and had to have this human growth experience. And but everything was new and wonderful, and my parents just loved me unconditionally,
So
totally.
when did you come? You and your folks come to Australia?
Yeah, we came to Australia on the 29th of June, 1949, and I was 2. And we came on a Qantas Constellation. Now, come on, a girl from the stars. What else is she going to come in? And
Yeah.
we didn't. Didn't come by boat, and it was very, very expensive. But my father had this business, and because my mother was pregnant with my sister at the time, he he wanted to. It was for her. My grandfather, my mother's father, moved with her brother to Australia. That's why we came.
And you
Uh,
went to Sydney first of all, did you?
we did, and that's how I know the date because I was on the front page of the Daily Mirror. And
Really? For
there
doing
was a
what? What were you doing?
yeah, there was me sitting on the suitcases in customs with my 2 little Greek dolls, and the headline said, "Nina will be popular with her new playmates." And
Excellent.
then, yeah, and then just a little thing underneath it, but it surprised everyone because it
Have you
just
still got that thing from the newspaper?
I do. My uncle
Yeah.
kept it, and
Excellent.
Yeah, I've got it in a frame, and it's in the book actually. And so I know, because it's exactly 60 years after, exactly in the Queen's Birthday Honours list, I was awarded the Order of Australia.
No, you told me that. We'll come to that now.
Yeah. So
So
that
tell us about, but
60
leading into
years.
the book, you mentioned the book, okay?
Yes,
And then
let's do
the name of your book is
Don't Cry, Dance.
exactly. Now, why is it called that? I heard you
That,
talk about it, but tell us
yeah,
again.
that was the story. I had no idea. I didn't have a birth certificate. I never had a birth certificate. I came over on my father's passport and written in there. And I was in Greece in 2017, I think it was. Yeah, 2017. And I was in Athens, my birth city, and I was supposed to go and to visit people, and everything fell through. And for some reason, I was meant to stay. And I decided that I would go and see if my name was written anywhere in Athens, that I was born there. And so I walked into the registry office this day, and because we spoke Greek at home, even my Polish mother spoke Greek too.
Okay.
Um, I went up to the man and I told him my name, my date of birth, etc., behind the counter. And he reached behind him and he grabbed this old ledger. And I remember him running his fingers down the ledger, and then he stopped at my name and he said, "You're here, you're here." And I was so thrilled. And then he looked me in the eye and he put out his hand and he shook my hand and he said, "Congratulations, you're an Athenian." And when he said that,
Okay.
my eyes welled up and little tears ran down my cheeks. And I said, "I'm going to cry now." And that's when he said, "Don't cry, dance." And that's why my book is called that.
So tell us a bit about your book. Tell us about your book.
Well, I'm a storyteller, and as an artist and a poet, it's very important. Stories are really important. And when you come from families like I did that have no stories left because there's no one left. I'm the absolute oldest now. There was no one to go to, no aunties, no uncles, no nothing. So my mother left her story for us, and she wrote it out before she died in 1985. But way before that, she wanted us to know a bit about her as a child and her growing up. And it took us to the point where the Gestapo got her. She was on the run for 4 years.
4 years.
So yeah, she was, and it with false papers. They only caught her. She was only in Auschwitz from 1944, so she missed a lot of years. Thank God for that. But she was on the run. She missed out on dying so many times. And
So this is
anyway, she wrote.
in her
Sorry,
memoirs. Whether she write it out by hand
she
or what?
yeah, she wrote it for us. She was really a good writer in English. She spoke 7 languages, my mum, and she was really intelligent. And she had one of those retentive memories. She could read something once and remember it, hear it once and remember it. And that's why there is a story in my book called Once Upon a Christmas Eve, her last Christmas in Auschwitz. She remembered every part and she wrote it afterwards. And
Wonderful.
so, yes, so I felt really blessed. So she gave me this paper sort of all wadded up, just up until the Gestapo got her. And a friend of mine was doing her editor's final year at uni, and she asked me if I had a short story for her to use. And I happened to have my mum's short story. And so I gave it to her, and she came back and she said, "Nina, this is amazing. You've got to put this down with your story of all that you've done and your mother's story in a book." Little did I know, because I knew nothing about my father. He never talked about it. I mean, they both had the tattoos on their arms, etc., but he never talked about it. And I didn't know. And then one day I had a visit from a Greek couple, and he's an academic. She's an artist from Sydney. And after they left, we were talking about family. After they left, I got an email from them the next day, and on
Okay.
the email there was a link. I clicked on the link, and there were 7 hours of interviews in the Holocaust Museum in Washington in the United States of my father with his story in French.
But who did and recorded those interviews?
This woman called Sophie Kaplan, who was working with a professor who is now an emeritus professor, Conrad Queet, who is a professor of Holocaust studies at the Jewish Museum in Sydney.
Yeah, but how did your father get to be this guy to do the interview and record them?
No, because they knew about my father, and because he was one of the very rare few that was with the Canada Commando, they chased him up, and she came quite a few times. My kids were little. I was just trying to survive as a single mum. So I knew she came a couple of times, but I didn't really pay much attention. And she interviewed him and she pushed him. And I could, in the recordings, you can hear him banging the table and all these Greek mannerisms. He didn't want to go there, but I'm so grateful that she pushed it because of that.
Are these on your website? Have you got links to these on your website?
I do. I have a link to the book, the audio book now.
No. Interviews with your father.
Yes, I don't have that in French. No, it's really very messy, Mike. It's all over.
Is it in French or is it English?
It's in French. I mean, I tried to translate it and transcribe it myself. I went to Margaret River as a writer's residency for 7 weeks. And went over and over and over because French was my first language, because it's the only language that both my parents could communicate. And then my mother learned Greek, and we had to speak Greek at home, but French was always lurking in the background. And
so you had like 3 languages: English, French, and Greek.
That's me, but my mum and dad, between them, my God, my mum had she had the Russian, the German, the Polish, the French.
Wow. Okay.
And then she learned the English, the Greek, and Italian. That was the last language she learned and she spoke in. And my father had the Spanish, the ancient Ladino Spanish. Because
I've heard this dialects. I don't know a lot about it, but I mean.
Yeah, very few people would have it now, because it was spoken in his home. After 600 years, they were kicked out of Spain during the Inquisition, the Jews. And his family kept speaking that same language. So it changed in Spain, but they still spoke the ancient Ladino.
So you took their story, the one your mother transcribed.
Yes.
Up to the point of the history of the family, and then your story continued on. Is that
my mother's, my father's, and my story is part 2. But I do come in with memories, little memories that I remember, like the woman in the teal blue dress. That's a full chapter. They're like the one that she wrote, her last Christmas, once upon a Christmas Eve, that she wrote and left us. So I would remember little things and I would come in. It was quite challenging to do a book with 3 people's stories and have them all woven together, but individually working as individual as well.
So just a thing of interest, or something to think on, is that at the Australian National Library in Canberra, okay, they got a whole, let's call it, department dedicated to capturing and recording stories about Australians and about, I'm trying to get the right, family histories, and that's sort of an oversimplification, but family histories. There's a whole department. Maybe you should get hold of them and then tell them about your book and that, because they got a whole department dedicated to recording family histories in Australia.
And that is the library in Canberra.
Yes, it's the Australian National Library.
Australian National. Will you be able to just send me a little note?
Well, I was there like with my wife, my cousins there. It's like we were there like 6 months ago. I went to Canberra with low expectations, I was blown away. And that library is like, wow, you know, you walk in, fabulous place. Basically a research library.
Yeah, I would love it.
My books are there. My books are in that library there. But
Okay.
I was trying to find out if Mike's books were in the library, and I happened to bump into this lady at the counter, and she said, "What are they about?" And she said, "Do I have any of my family?" And I said, "No." And then she said, "No, they're really interested in that." And I said, "Well, I've got some memoirs of different parts of the family, but they're not particularly well written as stories or memoirs." She said, "They don't care. They don't care, just so long as, you know, even if someone, you know, no matter
Yeah.
how bad it's written, they got a record. They're interested in the fact there's a record. That's the thing. Sorry, I digress. So
No, that's good to know, Mike. That's really, you know, my father did a lot of them. He brought the first televisions into Australia. He brought the first Italian music into Australia, the first Italian movies into Australia. He
what
was quite
TVs?
a big man.
What out of curiosity, what TVs did he bring in?
He brought Grundig's to when Channel 9 was setting up. He was the sole agent for Grundig in Australia.
Sorry, we're digressing here. Where was he working from?
From his office in
In
George Street.
what suburb in Sydney?
In George Street, Sydney, he had his office. It was called Magnetic Products Proprietary Limited. He had contacts all over the world because of the work that he did before the war happened.
That's
He
kind
was
of
all,
interesting. I'm getting right off topic here. But
yeah,
my father was always the MD of a Jewish family business, and they used to bring in Saba TV sets from Germany. Don't you remember SABA?
yeah.
And Dual, DUAL record players, Plattenspielers, you know, in
Yeah.
as well. So your
Well,
father
my
was,
dad bought the needles. He
yeah,
imported all the needles.
yeah.
Yep, the things he did, it was a big breakthrough because this was we arrived here in 49. This was very early 50s. He sussed it all out. He was very cluey businessman. He sussed what was missing. And to bring the first sound magnetic tapes into Australia for the radio stations, for film, all the sound for film, it was silent.
Okay.
He was the one that brought all that in. It was, you know, it was
Have you got a
big.
copy of your book to hand there nearby?
Yes, I do.
Where?
Yeah.
Can
Do you want me
show
to
it?
can
Yes,
I
please.
just grab it?
Yes,
Can
please.
I won't be a sec. It's right here.
No. That's fine.
I just wrote
Going anywhere.
I should have had it with me.
No, that's fine.
Okay. I should have had it with me, but I didn't.
No, it's all impromptu.
So this is my booking. See, it's got all my little.
Nina, just hold it a bit closer to the screen. Oh, there we go. That's
Can
a
you see
lovely cover, eh?
Yeah, that's the one I won the award for at the gala night of the Author and Book Launch Expo. I had the best cover. Now that cover, every single part of it has a reason for it. The teal blue from the lady in the teal blue dress.
Is that teal blue, that dress, is it?
That's a teal blue.
Okay.
That's teal blue. So the colour was from the teal blue. The mum and dad used to dance a lot. And they danced because they had music. We always had music playing. They enjoyed life fully. It was interesting because we had a Jewish family. Well, a couple and their daughter living next door to us in Randwick,
Did you live in Randwick? Okay.
yeah, we lived in I lived. He bought a house in Randwick, and that's interesting too. And they were always so sad, and the exact opposite. Where my parents, it was always music and dance, etc. And the flowers, my friend in the UK, when I was actually doing the writing of the book in Margaret River in WA, she rang me. I just finished my dad's story, and she rang me while I was there, and she said, "Nina, stop what you're doing. Your father has just come to me, and your mother." She's very one of these people that see spirits and all the rest. she said she described them. She didn't know anything about them.
Oh, really?
She said,
Okay.
they come to me and she said, they're dancing. They're doing like a tango. They used to dance. I said, God, they danced a lot. And then she said, they're handing, I'll put this down now. Can I put it down?
Sure, sure, yeah,
Oh,
sure.
okay, I'll leave it till I tell you. She said, they're handing me, hang on, I'm in the wrong way. They're handing me, and they want me to give this to you, a bunch of flowers, a big bunch. And they are every color that you can imagine. There are weeds there. There are cultivated flowers. There is every type. And they represent all the people in the world. And we're all different, but when we're all together as one, nothing can break us. We're strong. And so that was the analogy of the flowers, and that's why I put them at the front.
So as well as being an author, you up there in McMaster's Beach, you do other things. What else? Tell us what else you do.
I do. I'm an artist. I actually started as I was always fascinated with fabric, and I always wanted to put designs on fabric that could be used. I liked my art to be very practical, to be used, to be eaten off, to be slept under, to be worn. Because as a young child, I used to see women's dresses and think, oh, someone's made up that design and they're wearing it. And that's what I wanted to do. My mum was put off it when I was young because there was nothing like that in Australia then, when I went for that vocational guidance business. And the man said everything was imported from overseas at that time. But I was determined, and I did go to art school at National Art School at East Sydney. I just learned the very basics. And but I didn't go and do my screen printing only after I had my twins. I went back for a couple of terms at night. A friend of mine looked after my twins while I went and learned the very basics of screen printing. And then I started doing what was my absolute passion, and I ended up breaking a whole lot of new ground with it because no one else was doing it like me. And the Crafts Council of New South Wales, I took some of my stuff down, and then they employed me to be their artist for the Festival of Sydney in Hyde Park for 2 weeks, creating and printing the banners that we'd walk down the street holding, and that was my first big job as an artist. So I've worked in community, Mike, in just about every country town in New South Wales, across the Nullarbor to WA.
So you're doing what? What on the same topic? You know what were you doing?
What was I doing?
Yes.
Well, I was working.
Teaching.
It was about stories, but printing, so that people would print in a school. They might have a big event, and so every child would print their own. Because luckily I got a sponsor. The people that made the paints, the only people that made the fabric paints, became my sponsors. And I think a lot of this was to do with the fact that my parents were Jewish and went through Auschwitz, because they were a Jewish Russian family.
Okay.
And I had no idea the power of it. And they fully supported me and gave me everything. So I had paint, I had anything I needed, because I would have never been able to afford it. So I could go out into communities, and apart from them paying me, they didn't have to pay for the equipment.
Okay.
And so I was, they still have pennants and flags that we did together years ago. And they were all stories. There's stories about a town, stories about that person. I talk with the kids about peace, about environment, about whatever. And that's what we would do. And I made it very simple.
So what's coming at us next?
And then I started
the Don't Cry Dance book number 2. Is it going to be a sequel or another book?
Look, I'd really like to do another book, but it's going to be a book of my poetry, because that's another, and short stories, because I have many stories, and also working in the Pacific Islands. I did a lot of that.
I forgot about that. You went to Fiji for a bit.
With Fiji and Tuvalu. Tuvalu is the second smallest nation in the world, about 2,000 k's north of Fiji.
So how come you went there? What were you doing? How come you even got there?
Well, because there was a documentary crew following me around Fiji. I got eventually.
How did you get there?
How did I get to Fiji?
I suddenly wound up in Fiji. What? How did you get there?
How did I get to Fiji? My
Yeah.
sponsors saw how I worked in the tent in Hyde Park for the Festival of Sydney because they provided all the paint. And then they asked me if I would do a little demonstration video, like professional, for Fiji, because they do all everything for the South Pacific. In the Pacific, Fiji's the center of it, and they do a lot of stuff, and they use all their paints. And so he asked. Once I did this little thing on simple techniques that I had, and I'm pretty out there, as you could probably work down.
No, yeah, maybe. Didn't figure that.
They asked me if I'd like to go over there, and I became a consultant for the garment manufacturing industry of Fiji. And they were having problems with their paints, and they were having problems with this and that. And I would go in there with the rep, and I went into just about every printing t-shirt clothing factory the first time I went, and it was all run by the Indians, the Fiji Indians. But then I was asked to do demonstrations, and I realized that the demonstrations Fijians would be sitting in the front. They were teachers, they were people who were desperate to learn, but there was no art school, there was no way. And that's when I started seeing that there was a great need. I applied to the Australia Council for the Arts, who they knew me already from the work that I was doing, and I got a professional development grant. And I went there, and I was artist in residence in Fiji for 3 months. And then a documentary crew wanted to film me. It was called A Lasting Impression, a cross-cultural exchange between an Australian community artist and the people of Fiji. And
Sorry,
yeah.
is that actually on your website? Is there a link to that or what?
Yes, well, I haven't got it's a pretty old one. I've
That's
got it,
fine.
but I don't know how to put it up. I'm very technologically challenged.
We'll find somebody. I think you must put that on your website.
But I do. But anyway, that's what we did. That, and I was between going to different islands and working with the women and helping them set up. But it was just for the documentary at that time. And I was in the hotel one night, and a friend from there ran in and said, "Nina, would you like to go to Tuvalu?" And I said, "Where? What is Tuvalu? Where is Tuvalu?"
Shut, couldn't point you on a map, could you?
No, well, you would never notice. And she said it's a little Polynesian island just under the equator, and they've been waiting for someone like you to come. 9,000 people, 9 islands. They've got their own language, their own dances and culture, and she bought me a book. Like I said, is there something? So it was the Canadian government had 2 people from in Fiji who were working with the Canadian Pacific funds to fund anything in the Pacific from Canada. And they'd been requested many times to have someone to teach them how to do their own fabric. And I happened to be in the right place, and I was the only one. They were paying me really well because I wasn't getting any money from anywhere else. I was just running on the fact that that's how I do things. And I went to Tuvalu. I was the only white person there, and worked in the Maniapa, the big meeting house, with the Development Bank of Tuvalu, the ambassador in Fiji who was sending me film or anything that I needed. The plane would come in twice a week. They would get all the pigs off the runway. People would sleep on the runway during the night. Oh, what a culture shock that was. But it certainly enriched my life.
But have you had an opportunity to go back and to follow up with it?
I went twice, actually, Mike. I returned another time, and that was it. It's going out because that's where they measure the climate change and the sea level rises.
Can I ask you about that? Because there's some of those islands where they do feel it. They're like the first group to actually feel it.
Yeah, that is exactly right.
Above
2 meters above sea level is its highest point in Fiji.
Yeah.
And so, with the atoll, and they would come in. So you'd only have the World Health Organization and the United Nations. It wasn't a tourist place at all. and they were checking it. Actually, Darwin's hole is there in Tuvalu. And the reason I know that, because I was in the hotel, because I was staying in the hotel there. Well, it's like Faulty Towers. And one night off the plane, this American professor of geology and his wife, he was retired, arrived, and I saw them in the dining room because no one very new came in, and I started talking with them. And he said that one of his wishes was to find Darwin's hole. I will never forget that.
What is Darwin's hole? What is that?
Darwin's hole in Tuvalu. And he explained to me that was where Darwin had a theory that coral atolls were the tops of extinct volcanoes. And
Oh, okay.
yes, and there was a very good atoll there. There was a very good atoll there, and they came and they dug down and they took up the soil, whatever Darwin got, and found out that that's exactly right. And
And
he wanted.
they found like lava down deep there or something.
They would have, and that, but he knew about it. I didn't know any, but I knew the people because I was working at the grassroots. And so I asked. He said, "I don't know how we find it." And I asked,
because I've been to Sicily, and the remains of a volcano, when it cools, it's like a black soil.
Yeah. See, you know that. I didn't know anything like that, Mike. You know, I'm just an artist, you know, doing my little thing. But it was and also it was a good story. And I put him on because I asked the people that were doing the workshop with me. I said, "Do you know anything about this Darwin's hole?" And they did.
So why don't you write for us your next story about your adventures in Polynesia, Fiji?
Well,
You got a great story set in there, you know.
I have a few of them, I can tell
Why
you.
don't you do that one? I mean, I think particularly, you know, hooks into Darwin and the climate change. It's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Now where they have their houses sort of up on stilts, but even now the water's, you know, I mean, I was there in 93, 94, you know, even now the water's coming up. And they were very worried and concerned because where would they go? And apparently they approached the Australian government about maybe being able to move up to far north Queensland or somewhere. And they were knocked back then, but I went and I was the only outside person that went to the inauguration of the new Governor General of
really?
Tuvalu. Yeah, because all that was happening when I was there, and I had my camera, and no one had a camera on the island. And I asked the Australian ambassador through his secretary if they could send me some film because I'd run out of film, and it came over on the plane, and
What did you have there? Like an old Kodak or something? What do you have?
Yeah, no, I had, you know, sort of a reasonably good, nothing fancy, but not bad. And because I document everything, so I documented my workshops, and you know, therefore I was there. I was the only one to see it. There's 9 islands, and it's some of those women. They had to leave 2 months before I came for the workshop because the boat, everything's so away from each other that the boat that goes from island to island only goes every few months. So, so people were coming from afar. It's very interesting. Now that I've never thought of doing that, Mike. Thank you.
No worries. But I actually think I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, well.
I'm personally looking forward to that as your next book.
Oh, wow. Okay. I better please you then.
Yeah. But you must give us some thought as to what, I mean, you had a great title for book 1.
Yeah.
And a great cover. Covering a lot of things, including the blue teal dress. You must think of it about my adventures.
I've got to do a bit more than just my island stuff. My poetry is a big part because I document life through my poetry, but it's not like deep and meaningful. It's really very light. You know, like I wrote a poem called, I was looking at my wrinkles one day and I went, oh my God, look how many wrinkles I've got. So I wrote a poem called Ode to My Wrinkles. And And true, and that, you know, every wrinkle is a story, in the library of my life. You know, every wrinkle tells a story. And by the time I finished it, I'm going, bring another wrinkle on, because if everyone is another story,
I think there's your title.
where's my title?
Bring another wrinkle on.
Bring another. Thank you, Mike.
There we go. Bring another
yeah.
wrinkle. So on that note, but I'm looking forward to seeing your next book
Thank you.
about your adventures in what's that? Polynesia,
Yeah.
that would be, wouldn't it? Polynesia.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
All right. So on that note, I'll bid you farewell. Thank you for your time, eh?
Yeah, Mike, thanks very much for asking me. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Okay, we're going to leave the studio now, but don't run away.
I won't.
All right. Okay. Toodaloo.